Viacom may not be one of those names that you instantly recognize or have heard a lot before, but I promise you, they're among the biggest all-time media companies. I am confident that anybody who has seen any movies or TV shows over the past few decades has seen stuff put out by Viacom. For example, without them, we probably wouldn't have shows like South Park or SpongeBob. It's amazing how companies like this help shape our culture. That reminds me, whenever I hear that name, I always think about that animation that they would play after TV shows on Nickelodeon back in the day.
Viacom.
The reason it was played is because they are the owner of Nickelodeon, in addition to many others like MTV and CBS. Now, for a variety of reasons, this company hasn't had the best reputation, and I know many people are passionate about this, so I want to be clear that I'm not trying to change your feelings about them one way or the other. This video is meant to be as objective as possible. I have simply witnessed a lot of negative feelings toward Viacom, and I want to explore where they come from. So here we go. The first reason that I've identified behind this hatred has to do with their size and power. As I said, they are one of the biggest media companies that many would argue are too big. They control a significant part of the entertainment industry, and that does raise concerns. In fact, Viacom itself actually originated as part of CBS and was separated from it because of concerns of a monopoly. In 1970, the FCC was concerned that the three main TV networks, ABC, NBC, and CBS, were gaining too much control over the industry. To combat that, they made a rule that said networks couldn't syndicate their own shows, nor could they provide cable services to people. Kind of a way to separate the cable from the traditional networks and limit their power overall. So to comply with the rule, CBS took those parts of their business and spun them off into a separate company called Viacom. Meaning, right from the beginning, they were pretty big, generating almost $20 million in sales by syndicating CBS shows like I Love Lucy and providing cable to 90,000 subscribers. In 1976, they started the movie channel Showtime, meant to compete directly with HBO. In 1985, they acquired MTV in a $500 million deal that also included some lesser-known networks at the time called VH1 and Nickelodeon, and they have been the owners ever since, so it was under Viacom's control where both of those channels became household names. In 1992, it's strange, Viacom had a comedy channel called Ha, and HBO had a comedy channel called Comedy Channel that were merged together to create Comedy Central. They split the ownership initially, but Viacom bought out the other half in 2003, becoming the full owner. By 1994, they were growing away from cable systems, but toward movies when they spent $8 billion to buy the film studio Paramount. I would say a pretty major acquisition because it included the production studios, an extensive library of films previously produced by Paramount, and a major book publisher called Simon & Schuster. Also, in 1994, Viacom bought the 3,600 store movie retail chain Blockbuster Video. I mean, that was an eventful year, right? Buying Paramount and Blockbuster within a few months of each other, but they did spin off Blockbuster about a decade later. Then, in 1999, they acquired CBS in a $37 billion stock deal, bringing them back together with the company that they had started from almost 30 years earlier. I don't want to get too far into this one, but I should mention that they split apart in 2005 and then came back together in 2019, so kind of a complicated history there. In the year 2000, they bought the cable channel BET for $2.3 billion in stock, and the final thing that I want to mention right here is in 2005, they almost bought MySpace, but didn't offer to pay as much money as News Corp, so it went to them instead. So that is pretty big. It's a company that's been in control of so much of our entertainment over the years, and you could see how that could raise concern or even negative feelings from many people. But honestly, they're not unique in that way. Most of the stuff that we watch comes from a major company like this, which can also be concerning. But I want to continue with my list by talking about things that are much more unique to Viacom, and one of those would be the various criticisms toward their individual networks, and you'll see what I mean by that as I go through some of the biggest ones. Comedy Central is probably one of the edgiest channels on basic cable. Do you remember how late at night they used to air The Secret Stash? It was like a lot of uncensored stuff. I don't know, it's just an example of some of the outrageous comedy that they've aired over the years. It has upset numerous parents and really anybody that thinks that the jokes or content may have been inappropriate or crossed a line of some kind. MTV, I think the biggest criticism of music television is that they've moved away from music. That was pretty much all they did when Viacom bought them, and they have since gone in a much much different direction. BET stands for Black Entertainment Television, and they've been criticized for perpetuating stereotypes depicting African Americans in a negative way. I can't say that I'm personally too familiar with the programming, nor am I the one to speak on it anyway, but there has been concern over it. Nickelodeon. Many fans of the channel will tell you that the quality of the shows are just not what they used to be. The creativity is lacking and they become too reliant on proven shows like SpongeBob. I've actually made an entire video about that, but for good or bad, Viacom has been the one behind it. They've been behind all of these. So if you're not happy with the direction that MTV or Nickelodeon has taken, or if you take issue with the content over at Comedy Central or BET, then you may have some negative feelings toward Viacom. Next up is the YouTube copyright lawsuit. The website that we are on right now and pretty much all of social media would be very different if Viacom had been successful in doing what they wanted to do. In 2007, Viacom sued YouTube for $1 billion. They said that thousands of clips that they own the rights to had been posted on YouTube for everybody to see for free. It basically raised the question of who is to blame for this. If someone posts something on YouTube, or any platform really, and it violates a copyright law, who is responsible? Is it the person who posted it, or the site that they posted it to? There were plenty of questions like that floating around in the early days of social media. Well, Viacom was trying to hold YouTube responsible. It was a tricky, drawn-out case involving the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, but it was ultimately settled in 2014. Undisclosed terms, and apparently there was no money exchanged, but it turns out that everything's good as long as there's a system in place that allows Viacom or whoever holds the copyrights to take down the videos that violate it. Here's a weird part of it. During the case, the chief counsel for YouTube even accused Viacom of secretly uploading videos to the site and then complaining about them being there. They say Viacom even intentionally made videos look worse so that they appeared to be stolen or uploaded by others, even using phony emails to do it from untraceable computers. It seems like there was some crazy stuff going on during that time. I recommend you look further into the details, but most of it was making Viacom look like the villain. There were legitimate copyright concerns, of course, but they were seen as the ones trying to control the freedom of YouTube and the internet in general. If they had won that initial lawsuit, you probably wouldn't be watching this video on YouTube right now. The next reason for people to potentially dislike Viacom is Sumner Redstone, the longtime leader and majority owner of Viacom and easily more associated with the company than any other individual. Early in his career, he worked with the Army during World War II, earned a law degree from Harvard, and went on to join his family's chain of movie theaters called National Amusements. By 1987, that company had grown big enough through its core business and outside investments to actually buy Viacom for $3.4 billion. I mean, he was a successful businessman known for taking risks that generally worked out. It was under his leadership that they bought Paramount and Blockbuster and CBS. He is quite a figure where you can find a lot to respect, but also a lot to criticize. You might remember this, but in 2005, 2006, Tom Cruise was all over the news, talking about Scientology and jumping on Oprah's couch. Well, Redstone felt that the image he was portraying was hurting his movie sales, specifically for Mission Impossible 3 that had been made with Paramount. So Redstone ended his contract, said that he didn't want to work with him anymore, and banned him from the Paramount lot. Something that Tom Cruise fans did not appreciate. So if you support Tom Cruise and his movies, you might not be a fan of Redstone or Viacom. That's like the incident that stands out, but from what I can tell, he was overall short-tempered and just hard to get along with. He was also very reluctant to ever give up control of the company. When he was approaching 90 years old, he said, "I have no intention of ever retiring or of dying," though he did eventually die in the year 2020 at 97 years old. There's also a number of scandals involving his personal life as far as his family and wife and relationships. I don't want to go too far into those. I just want to convey that this may not have been the most likable person. Alright, I'm only halfway through the list, but I'm going to start moving much faster. The remaining four are definite sources of hatred among certain people, but I don't believe to the same extent, and they're much simpler and more isolated. While I'm on the topic of the leaders, I guess I should mention Les Moonves. He has been strongly connected with the company in that when Viacom and CBS split up in 2005, he went on to be the CEO of the CBS part. There have been sexual harassment claims against him. He's someone who's not too well liked by a lot of the public for multiple reasons, or by many of the people he's worked with, like Howard Stern. I told you, I'm gonna go fast here, but definitely some controversial leadership over at Viacom. Another reason behind the hatred would be the infamous Super Bowl wardrobe malfunction. I think most people have heard about this before. During the 2004 Super Bowl halftime show, Janet Jackson's breast was briefly exposed on television and broadcast to 150 million viewers. The show was put on by MTV, owned by Viacom, of course, and they were at the center of it. It upset so many people to a point where there was a record 500,000 complaints filed with the FCC, all people who were probably not too happy with Viacom. Another reason involves Blockbuster. I wouldn't go so far as to say that Viacom was responsible for killing them, but they may have contributed. They spun off the company in 2004, but just before they did, they borrowed over $900 million and distributed it as a special dividend, essentially taking out a loan and giving the money to the shareholders of Blockbuster. But considering Viacom owned 82% of Blockbuster, most of that money just went to them. So when Blockbuster was put out on their own, it was with all of this extra debt, which, you know, made things harder. So if you miss Blockbuster, you may have some bad feelings toward Viacom. My final reason is Neopets. It's a website where you interact with digital pets, and I'll admit that I have never played with Neopets, so I can't say too much about this. But I do know that they were bought by Viacom in 2005 and resold in 2014, so if you dislike what was happening with Neopets during those years, again, you may have some bad feelings toward Viacom. Let me know in the comments, how do you feel about Viacom? Do you like them, or if you dislike them, is it because of one of the reasons that I talked about, or is there something else? And of course, there's a lot more that could be talked about. This is one of the biggest media companies, so I chose to focus on the parts that I felt were the most important or the most interesting. Please feel free to add to the conversation, and any other thoughts you have about Viacom or anything else I talked about in this video, leave them in the comments. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thank you for watching.